The poker chips hit the table with a finality that made Ophelia's blood turn to ice. Zephyr Blackthorn, the man she'd loved with every fiber of her being, had just wagered her freedom on a pair of sevens and lost it to a stranger with cold blue eyes and calloused hands. "Well, I'll be damned," drawled the winner, ranch hand Calloway Steele. As he studied the cards scattered across the saloon table, "Looks like I just won myself a woman." Ophelia's emerald dress rustled as she stood frozen by the bar, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Zephyr wouldn't meet her eyes, his jaw clenched tight as he stared at his losing hand. The outlaw who'd stolen her heart from her father's ranch 6 months ago had just gambled her away like she was nothing. "More than cattle. Take her," Zephyr said roughly, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's yours now, Zephyr." Ophelia's voice cracked like a whip across the smoky saloon. "How could you?" The dark-haired outlaw finally looked at her, and she saw something that made her stomach lurch relief. As if losing her had solved some terrible problem she'd never known existed, Calloway rose slowly from his chair, his 6-foot frame unfolding like a cougar preparing to strike. Unlike Zephyr's lean, dangerous beauty, this man was built like a fortress, broad shoulders, massive hands, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore simple ranch clothes instead of Zephyr's flashy vest and silver spurs. "Ma'am," Calloway said quietly, his voice carrying a surprising gentleness, "I don't hold with owning people. You're free to go wherever you please." Ophelia's laugh held no humor. "Free? I have no money, no horse, no family who'll take me back after running off with an outlaw." "What kind of freedom is that?" Zephyr pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "Ophelia, don't." She held up a trembling hand. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. You promised me we'd build a life together. You said you loved me." "I do love you." Zephyr's voice broke on the words. "That's why I had to let you go before." She could demand an explanation. The saloon doors burst open, and Sheriff Augustus Vale stormed in with 3 deputies, their guns drawn and badges gleaming. "Zephyr Blackthorn." Vale's voice boomed across the suddenly silent room. "You're under arrest for the robbery of the Sweetwater Bank." Chaos erupted. Zephyr's hand flew to his gun, but Calloway was faster, grabbing Ophelia and pulling her behind the bar as bullets began to fly. In the melee that followed, Zephyr shot out the back window and dove through it, disappearing into the night like smoke. When the gunfire stopped, Ophelia found herself pressed against Calloway's chest, his arms forming a protective barrier around her. She could feel his heart hammering against her cheek, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to his clothes. "He's gone," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Calloway's hand came up to stroke her auburn hair. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I truly am." As Sheriff Vale questioned the remaining patrons, and Calloway gave his statement, Ophelia sat numbly in a corner booth, trying to piece together how her world had collapsed so completely in the span of 10 minutes. The man she'd loved had sold her to pay a gambling debt and abandoned her to flee from the law, but the stranger who'd won her had set her free. And somehow that hurt almost as much as Zephyr's betrayal. Dawn broke gray and cheerless over Tombstone Creek as Calloway helped Ophelia onto his wagon. She'd spent the night at the boarding house, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of her shattered life, while he'd slept in the livery stable with his horses. "Where will you go?" he asked gently, settling beside her on the wooden seat. Ophelia pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I don't know. I can't go home. My father disowned me when I ran off with Zephyr. I have no other family." Calloway studied her profile as they rolled out of town, noting the proud tilt of her chin, despite her obvious despair. Even with her eyes red from crying and her dress wrinkled from sleeping in it, she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "I have a proposition," he said carefully. "Our ranch is about a day's ride from here. I could use help with the cooking and cleaning, and you need a place to stay. It would be honest work for honest wages." Ophelia turned to look at him, searching his weathered face for any sign of ulterior motives. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Maybe not," Calloway admitted, "but I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. I know you didn't deserve what happened last night. As they traveled through rolling hills dotted with mesquite and sage, Calloway told her about his ranch, 500 acres of good grazing land, with a small cabin and a dozen head of cattle. He'd built it with his own hands after leaving his job as a deputy sheriff, tired of chasing outlaws and watching good people get hurt in the crossfire. "Why did you quit being a lawman?" Ophelia asked. Calloway was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "I killed a man. A young outlaw, barely 20. He drew on me, and I had no choice. But ... double quotes, he shrugged. His mother came to the funeral, looked me right in the eye, and asked if I was proud of making her a childless woman. Wasn't your fault? Maybe not, but I decided there had to be a better way to make a living than putting bullets in people." They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the simple meal Calloway had packed: bread, cheese, and dried apples. Ophelia found herself studying this quiet man who'd shown her more kindness in 12 hours than Zephyr had in their last month together. "Tell me about him," Calloway said suddenly. "The outlaw? What made you love him?" Ophelia flinched at the question, but something in Calloway's tone made her want to answer honestly. "Zephyr was ... electric. When he smiled at me, it felt like being struck by lightning. He was charming and dangerous, and he made me feel alive in a way I'd never experienced. And now? Now I wonder if what I thought was love was just ... excitement. The thrill of doing something forbidden." She picked at the bread in her hands. "He never talked about the future the way you do, never made real plans. It was always someday. And when things settled down, as they resumed their journey," Ophelia found herself comparing the two men. Where Zephyr had been, all flash and swagger, Calloway possessed a quiet strength that seemed to run bone deep. He didn't fill every silence with charming words, but when he spoke, his words carried weight. The sun was setting when they crested a hill and saw Calloway's ranch spread out below them. It was modest, but well-maintained, with a sturdy log cabin, a red barn, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. "It's beautiful," Ophelia said, and meant it. "It's home," Calloway replied simply, as they pulled up to the cabin. A Mexican woman emerged from the doorway, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her dark eyes bright with curiosity. "Calloway," she called out in accented English. "You didn't tell me you were bringing a guest, Esperanza. This is Miss Ophelia. She'll be staying with us for a while, helping with the house." Calloway climbed down and offered Ophelia his hand. "Ophelia, meet Esperanza Valdez. She's been looking after me since I built this place." Esperanza's keen eyes took in Ophelia's expensive dress in obvious distress, but she simply smiled warmly and bustled them both inside. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture and colorful woven rugs on the wooden floors. "Look exhausted, Mia," Esperanza said kindly. "Come, I'll show you to your room." As Ophelia followed the older woman down a short hallway, she caught Calloway's eye over her shoulder. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, protective perhaps, but something else too. Something that made her pulse quicken despite everything that had happened. Maybe, she thought, as Esperanza showed her to a small but clean bedroom. Freedom wasn't such a terrible thing after all. 3 weeks into her new life, Ophelia stood in the kitchen before dawn, kneading bread dough, while coffee bubbled on the stove. The routine of ranch life had become a balm to her wounded spirit, the predictable rhythm of meals and chores, the satisfaction of honest work, and the growing comfort she found in Calloway's steady presence. "You're up early," his deep voice came from the doorway. Ophelia turned, flour dusting her hands, to find him silhouetted against the gray morning light. He'd been out checking the cattle since before sunrise, his hair still damp from washing at the pump. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "I keep thinking about him." Calloway's voice was gentle, without a trace of jealousy. "Yes," Ophelia shaped the dough into loaves, avoiding his eyes. "No, it's foolish. He sold me, Calloway. I was nothing more than a horse or a piece of furniture. But sometimes I still ... love him." Calloway finished quietly. The words hung between them like a challenge. In the growing light, Ophelia could see the careful control in Calloway's expression. The way he held himself rigid, as if bracing for a blow. "I don't know," she whispered. "I thought I did." But the man I loved would never have done what Zephyr did. So maybe what I'm mourning isn't him at all, but the illusion of him. Calloway stepped closer, his work boots silent on the wooden floor. Ophelia. Before he could finish, the thunder of hoofbeats echoed across the yard. They both froze, listening as multiple horses approached at a gallop. Through the window, they saw 4 riders silhouetted against the dawn sky. And Ophelia's heart stopped. The lead rider was Zephyr. "Get away from the window," Calloway ordered, his hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip. But Ophelia was already moving toward the door. "Zephyr," she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. The dark-haired outlaw dismounted with fluid grace, his familiar smile flashing white in the morning light. He wore new clothes, a black vest embroidered with silver thread, expensive boots, and a hat that must have cost more than most men made in a month. "Hello, darlin'," he drawled, spreading his arms wide. "Did you miss me?" Behind him, his 3 companions remained mounted, their hands resting on their weapons. Ophelia recognized them Joaquin Santos, the knife fighter, Mordecai Cross, whose scarred face spoke of a dozen violent encounters, and young Billy Thorne, barely 18, but already wanted for murder. "What are you doing here?" Ophelia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "I came for you, of course." Zephyr's eyes flicked to Calloway, who had emerged from the cabin with his rifle in hand. "Oh, I see you've made yourself comfortable with your new owner." "I'm not owned by anyone," Ophelia said sharply. "Calloway gave me my freedom." Zephyr laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Freedom? Is that what he calls it? Look at you, Ophelia. Dressed like a servant, flower in your hair, playing house with a broken-down exclaiming." Calloway's rifle didn't waver. "State your business, Blackthorn, then ride on. You're not welcome here." "My business is with my woman," Zephyr replied, his hand dropping to his gun. "I made a mistake in Tombstone Creek, lost my head over a bad hand of cards, but I've come to make it right." From his vest, he pulled out a thick roll of bills. $100, more than enough to buy her back. "She's not for sale," Calloway said flatly. "Everything's for sale, friend. It's just a matter of price." Zephyr's smile turned predatory. "But if you won't take money, maybe we can settle this another way." The tension in the yard was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ophelia looked between. The 2 men, one representing her past, all flash and dangerous charm, the other her present, steady and true. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she realized this moment would define the rest of her life. "I'll go with you," she said suddenly. Both men turned to stare at her in shock. "Ophelia." "No." Calloway's voice was raw with pain. "I have to," she said, her eyes locked on Zephyr's triumphant face. "But I need to know something first." She stepped closer to the outlaw, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Why did you sell me?" "The real reason," Zephyr's smile faltered. "For just a moment, does it matter? I'm here now. It matters to me." For a heartbeat, she saw something vulnerable in his expression. Then his mask slipped back into place. "I needed the money for a job. Big score that would set us up for life. But it required a stake, and you were ... double quotes." He shrugged. "Expendable." The word hit Ophelia like a physical blow. Not beloved. Not cherished. Expendable. She turned to look at Calloway, seeing the quiet pain in his blue eyes. The way he held himself ready to fight for her, even knowing she was choosing another man. And suddenly, "Changed my mind," Ophelia said, her voice carrying across the yard with crystal clarity. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Zephyr." The outlaw's face darkened like a storm cloud. "The hell you're not. You belong to me, Ophelia. You always have." "No," she said firmly, moving to stand beside Calloway. "I belong to a dream of you. But dreams aren't real, and the man I loved never existed." Zephyr's hand twitched toward his gun. "You're making a mistake. This dirt farmer can't give you what I can. Adventure, excitement, a life worth living. What you call adventure, I call running from the law. What you call excitement, I call never knowing if you'll come home alive." Ophelia's voice grew stronger. "With each word, Calloway offers something you never could, a real future." Mordecai Cross spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Boss, Let's just take her. We've got the numbers. But Zephyr held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Ophelia's face. She could see the war raging behind his dark gaze, pride warring with genuine feeling. Possession fighting against what might have been love. Is this really what you want? He asked, his voice softer now. A life of drudgery. Cooking and cleaning and growing old before your time? I want a life with someone who sees me as more than expendable, Ophelia replied. Someone who builds instead of destroys. Someone who keeps his promises. Calloway stepped forward, his rifle still ready, but his voice calm. You heard the lady. Time for you to ride on? Zephyr's face twisted with rage. It's like hell I will draw, you bastard. His hand flashed to his gun, but Calloway was already moving. The ranch hand's rifle barked once, and Zephyr's weapon went spinning from his hand, blood streaming from his fingers. Next shot won't be a warning, Calloway said evenly. Joaquin Santos and Billy Thorne both reached for their guns, but froze. As Esperanza appeared on the cabin's roof with a shotgun trained on them, I wouldn't, Ninos, the older woman called down sweetly. This old bird still has good eyes and steady hands. The standoff stretched taut as a violin string. Zephyr cradled his bleeding hand against his chest, his face pale with shock and fury. This isn't over, he snarled at Ophelia. You'll come crawling back when you realize what a mistake you've made? The only mistake I made was believing your lies for so long, Ophelia replied. Goodbye, Zephyr. The outlaw's face went through a dozen emotions before settling on cold hatred. He swung up onto his horse one-handed, his men following suit. Regret this, he called back as they wheeled their mounts toward the road. All of you. As the dust cloud from their departure settled, Ophelia found herself trembling from head to toe. The magnitude of what had just happened crashed over her like a wave she'd chosen her future, burned her bridges, and declared her heart in front of witnesses. Calloway set his rifle aside and turned to her, his blue eyes searching her face. Did you mean it? What you said about wanting a future with me? Ophelia looked up at this man who'd shown her what real love looked like, patient, steady, selfless. I meant every word, if you'll have me. Instead of answering with words, Calloway cupped her face in his work-roughened hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her toes curl. It was nothing like Zephyr's passionate, demanding kiss, as this was a promise. A benediction, a homecoming all wrapped into one. Well, it's about time. Esperanza called down from the roof. I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever. They broke apart laughing, Ophelia's cheeks burning with embarrassment and joy. But as they headed back toward the cabin, arm in arm, she caught sight of a glint of metal in the distant hills. Someone was watching them through a spyglass. Calloway, she said quietly, not wanting to alarm Esperanza. He followed her gaze and swore under his breath. I see it. Zephyr's not the type to give up easily. What do we do? Calloway's jaw tightened with determination. Prepare for a fight, and we make sure we're ready when he comes back. As they reached the cabin door, Ophelia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She'd chosen love over excitement, safety over danger, but Zephyr Blackthorne wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat gracefully. The real battle for her future was just beginning. 2 days later, as the attack came at dawn, Ophelia jerked awake. To the sound of gunfire and Calloway's urgent voice, "Stay down. They're surrounding the house." She rolled out of bed and crawled to the window, peering through the shutters. Muzzle flashes lit the gray morning like deadly fireflies, and she counted at least 6 attackers positioned around the ranch buildings. Ophelia. Zephyr's voice carried across the yard. Come out now, and nobody else has to die. Like hell, Calloway muttered, checking his rifle from his position by the front window. Esperanza, you all right back there? Mijo, came the reply from the kitchen. These old bones have been through worse. Ophelia grabbed the Winchester that Calloway had taught her to use over the past weeks. Her hand shook as she checked the ammunition. But her aim was steady when she spotted one of Zephyr's men trying to sneak toward the barn. Her first shot splintered the wood inches from his head, sending him diving for cover behind a water trough. Good shot, Calloway said approvingly. Keep them pinned down while I try to get a better angle. For the next hour, they held their ground against overwhelming odds. Calloway's marksmanship and Esperanza's strategically placed shotgun blasts kept the outlaws at bay, but their ammunition was running low. "This is madness," Ophelia called out during a brief lull in the gunfire. "Zephyr, people are going to get hurt. Only if you keep being stubborn," he replied. "I've got all day, darling. Do you?" That's when they heard the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. Ophelia's heart sank, thinking Zephyr had brought reinforcements, but Calloway's whoop of joy told a different story. "It's Sheriff Vale," he shouted. "With a posse, 6 lawmen came charging over the hill, badges gleaming and guns blazing. Sheriff Augustus Vale himself led the charge, his gray mustache bristling with righteous fury. The battle turned quickly after that. Caught between the cabin's defenders and the arriving posse, Zephyr's gang found themselves outgunned and surrounded. Joaquin Santos threw down his weapons first, followed by young Billy Thorne and the others. But Zephyr wasn't finished. "If I can't have you, no one can," he screamed, spurring his horse toward the cabin with his gun drawn. Calloway stepped into the doorway, his rifle raised, but Ophelia was faster. Her Winchester cracked once, and Zephyr tumbled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. He hit the ground hard and lay still. The sudden silence felt deafening after the chaos of battle. Smoke drifted across the yard like morning mist as Sheriff Vale and his men secured the surviving outlaws. Zephyr. Ophelia ran to where he lay bleeding in the dust, her heart clenching despite everything he'd done. The outlaw's dark eyes found hers, filled with pain and something that might have been regret. You shot me," he whispered. "You were going to kill Calloway," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "Would have saved you from making a mistake." His breath came in short gasps. "Could have given you the world, Ophelia." "I don't want the world," she said softly. "I just want a home." Zephyr's laugh turned into a cough. "Always were. To practical for your own good." Sheriff Vale knelt beside them, his weathered face grim. "He's not hurt bad, but he'll need a doctor. More importantly, he's got warrants in 3 territories. This is the end of the line for Zephyr Blackthorn." As the posse loaded the wounded outlaw into a wagon, Zephyr's eyes never left Ophelia's face. She saw a dozen emotions there: love, hatred, regret, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. "Be happy," he said as they carried him away.
Yes.
"All I ever wanted for you?" Whether that was true or just another of his charming lies, Ophelia would never know. But as she watched the wagon disappear down the dusty road, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. Calloway's arms came around her from behind, solid and warm and real. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "He can't hurt you anymore. Never really could," Ophelia replied, leaning back against his chest. "I just thought he could because I gave him that power, but not anymore." Sheriff Vale approached them, tipping his hat respectfully. "Miss Ophelia, I'll need your statement about what happened here. But I want you to know you saved lives today. That was some fine shooting." As they walked back toward the cabin, surveying the damage from the battle, Esperanza emerged with a broom and a determined expression. "Well," she announced briskly, "this place won't clean itself, and we have a wedding to plan." Ophelia and Calloway stopped dead in their tracks. "Wedding?" they said in unison. Esperanz. A gave them a look that would have cowed a charging bull. "You think I'm blind? You think I don't see the way you look at each other? Mijo, you ask this woman to marry you right now, or I'll beat you with this broom." Calloway laughed, the sound rich and warm as honey. "Yes, ma'am." He turned to Ophelia, his blue eyes twinkling with mischief and love. "Ophelia, will you marry me?" "I thought you'd never ask," she replied, going up on her toes to kiss him as their lips met. Ophelia felt the last pieces of her broken heart finally heal. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the little church at Redemption Falls, with half the county in attendance. Word had spread about the ranch battle and the romantic story behind it, and folks came from miles around to see the woman who'd chosen love over outlawry. Ophelia wore a simple ivory dress that Esperanza had sewn with loving hands, adorned with wildflowers that Calloway had picked that morning? As she walked down the aisle on Sheriff Vale's arm, he'd volunteered to give her. Away her eyes never left Calloway's face. He stood at the altar in his best black suit, his usually unruly hair slicked back, and his blue eyes bright with happiness. Beside him stood his best man, Deputy Marshal Tobias Whitehawk, a childhood friend who'd ridden in from Denver for the occasion. "Dearly beloved," began Pastor Nathaniel Cross, his voice carrying easily through the packed church, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other their heart's true home." As the familiar words washed over her, Ophelia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been a starry-eyed girl, infatuated with a dangerous man's charm. Today, she was a woman who understood the difference between love and infatuation, between excitement and happiness. Do you, Calloway Steele, take Ophelia to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?
I do.
Calloway's voice rang out strong and true, his eyes never leaving hers. And do you, Ophelia, take Calloway to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do, she whispered, then louder. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Calloway, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and devotion. As they broke apart to the thunderous applause of their friends and neighbors, Ophelia felt tears of pure joy streaming down her cheeks. The reception was held in the church hall, with tables groaning under the weight of dishes brought by every family in the county. There was dancing to fiddle music, speeches that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious, and enough cake to feed a small army. "You look happy, Mia," Esperanza said, as she helped Ophelia change out of her wedding dress later that evening. "I am happy," Ophelia replied, smoothing down her blue traveling dress. "Truly completely happy. And the outlaw? Do you ever think of him?" Ophelia paused, considering the question honestly. "Sometimes. But not with longing anymore. More like remembering. A fever dream. Intense while it lasted, but ultimately unreal." Esperanza nodded approvingly. "That is wisdom, Nina. The heart sometimes must be broken before it can learn to love truly." As the newlyweds prepared to leave for their honeymoon a week at a cabin in the mountains that belonged to Calloway's cousin, Sheriff Vale approached with an envelope in his hand. "This came for you yesterday," he said, handing it to Ophelia. From the territorial prison, Ophelia's heart skipped a beat. The letter was addressed in Zephyr's familiar handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it and read, "Dearest Ophelia, I write this from my cell, where I have had much time to think about the man I became and the things I did. I want you to know that watching you choose him over me was the first honest moment I'd had in years. You deserved better than I could give you, and I'm glad you found it. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that if I ever truly loved anything in this world, it was you. Be happy with your ranch hand. He's a better man than I ever was. Your devoted servant, no longer master. ZBLACKTHORNP.S. I've enclosed the deed to a small property I own near San Antonio. Consider it a wedding gift, and my apology for the pain I caused." Ophelia stared at the letter for a long moment, then showed it to Calloway. He read it silently, his expression thoughtful. "How does that make you feel?" he asked gently. "Sad," she admitted, sad for the man he might have been if he'd made different choices, but also ... free. Completely free. Calloway folded the letter carefully and handed it back to her. "Keep it or burn it. That's your choice. Either way, it's in the past now." Ophelia looked at the letter once more, then walked to the fireplace and tossed it into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, carrying Zephyr's words up the chimney. In a spiral of smoke, "Now it's truly in the past," she said, turning back to her husband with a smile that lit up the entire room as they climbed into their wagon for the journey to their honeymoon cabin. The whole county waved them off with cheers and well wishes. Esperanza blew kisses, and called out final instructions about taking care of each other. "Ready, Mrs. Steele?" Calloway asked, taking the reins. "Ready for anything, Mr. Steele?" Ophelia replied, settling beside him with a contentment she'd never known was possible. As they drove off into the sunset, her hand clasped firmly in his, Ophelia knew that her real life was just beginning. 10 years later, Ophelia stood on the wraparound porch of their expanded ranch house, watching her husband teach their twin daughters, Luna and Stella, how to rope fence posts. At 8 years old, both girls had inherited their father's steady hands and their mother's determined spirit. "Mama," called their youngest, 5-year-old Jasper, as he came running from the barn with a basket of eggs. "The new foal is standing. Up! Come see!" Ophelia laughed, wiping flour from her hands on her apron. The ranch had prospered beyond their wildest dreams. They now owned 3,000 acres, employed a dozen hands, and their cattle brand was recognized throughout Colorado territory. "In a minute, sweetheart," she called back. "Let me finish this bread first." Through the kitchen window, she could see their latest addition to the family, a beautiful Palomino mare that Calloway had bought for her birthday. At 32, Ophelia had never felt more alive or more loved. Mrs. Steele, one of their ranch hands, young Timothy Cross, appeared at the kitchen door. "There's a rider coming up the road. Says he's got business with you and Mr. Calloway." Ophelia wiped her hands and walked outside, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. The rider was elderly, well-dressed, and completely unfamiliar. He dismounted carefully, favoring his left leg. "Mrs. Steele?" "My name is Clarence Worthington. I'm an attorney from Denver." Calloway appeared at her side, having noticed the visitor. "What can we do for you, Mr. Worthington?" The lawyer pulled out an official-looking document. "I'm here regarding the estate of one Zephyr Blackthorne, recently deceased." Ophelia felt her breath catch. "Zephyr is dead?" "I'm afraid so. Consumption took him last month in the territorial prison. But before he died, he made an unusual request." Worthington cleared his throat. "Left his entire estate to you, Mrs. Steele, everything he owned, properties, investments, even a small gold mine in California. It's worth approximately $50,000. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. $50,000 was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. "I don't want it," Ophelia said immediately. Ophelia, Calloway said gently. "Maybe you should think about this. There's nothing to think about. That money came from robbery and violence. I won't profit from other people's suffering." Worthington nodded approvingly. "I had a feeling you might say that. Mr. Blackthorne anticipated your reaction, which is why he included this provision." He handed her a sealed letter. "He suggested that if you refused the inheritance, you might consider donating it to charity," he specifically mentioned. "Orphanages and schools for children in need." Ophelia opened the letter with trembling hands. Zephyr's handwriting was weaker now, but still recognizable. "My dearest Ophelia, if you're reading this, then I've finally paid the price for my choices. I don't expect you to mourn me. I'm not sure I'd want you to. But I hope you'll accept this. Final gift, not for me, but for the children who need a better start than either of us had. Prison has a way of clearing a man's vision. I see now that I spent my life taking from others instead of giving. Maybe this money can build something good instead of destroying it. You always had the wisdom I lacked to use it well. Tell your husband he's a lucky man. Tell your children their mother is extraordinary. And remember that sometimes even the worst of us can find redemption in our final acts. With love and respect." Zephyr Ophelia folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down her face. Not for the man Zephyr had been, but for the man he might have become if he'd found the courage to change sooner. "What do you think?" she asked Calloway. Her husband studied her face with those steady blue eyes that had seen her through so many storms. "I think a school for orphaned children would be a fine legacy. I think calling it the Blackthorne Academy might give other lost souls hope that redemption is possible." 2 years later, the Blackthorne Academy for Children opened its doors in Denver, funded entirely by Zephyr's estate. It housed, fed, and educated over 100 children who might otherwise have ended up on the streets. Ophelia stood in the Academy's main hall during the dedication ceremony. holding baby Marcus, their newest addition, while Calloway kept Luna and Stella from climbing on the furniture. The walls were lined with photographs of smiling children who'd found new lives through education and care. Strange to think he accomplished more good in death than he ever did in life, she murmured. To her husband? Maybe that's the point, Calloway replied. Maybe redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about making sure the future is better. As they walked back to their hotel that evening, Ophelia caught sight of their reflection in a shop window, a family of 5, healthy and happy and whole. She thought of the frightened girl who'd stood on an auction block 12 years ago, certain her life was over. That girl could never have imagined this moment, this life, this bone-deep contentment. "What are you smiling about?" Calloway asked. "Just thinking about how far we've come. How many times I've been grateful for the day you won me in that poker game." Calloway stopped walking and pulled her into his arms, right there on the busy Denver street. "Best hand I ever played, even though I was bluffing." "You were bluffing?" Ophelia gasped. "Pair of threes," he admitted with a grin. "But I figured any woman brave enough to love an outlaw was worth a gamble." She kissed him then, surrounded by their children's laughter and the bustle of city life, tasting the sweetness of a love that had grown stronger with each passing year. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "Let's go home." And as they walked toward the train station that would carry them back to their ranch, their children, and their future, Ophelia knew that she had finally found what she'd been searching for all along, not excitement or adventure, but the quiet miracle of being truly, completely loved. The ranch hand had indeed bought her freedom, and in freeing her, he had freed himself to love and be loved in return. As for the outlaw who had sold her, his final gift had become a testament to the possibility of redemption. Even in the darkest hearts it was, Ophelia reflected as their train pulled out of Denver Station. A better ending than any of them had dared to hope for.